quite a cloudy start across Northern Ireland and a few more clearer spells across Northern Ireland, northern parts of Wales too, but chillier here. We could even see some pockets of frost and also some fog, and plenty of cloud across southern and central areas of England. Quite murky starts and this fog slow to clear in places, so do take care if you're travelling around through the morning. Then through much of the day it remains fairly similar. Should start to see some sunshine across Wales and northern England, but that cloud is set to stay across the south and southeast and turning quite blustery across the far north of Scotland through the day too. A cooler day on offer for most, but for many across Scotland, temperatures above average for the time of year. Heading into tomorrow, likely to see more outbreaks of rain and drizzle across parts of Scotland, quite blustery here too. And elsewhere, plenty of cloud around, though it is going to be staying largely dry. Both best of the sunshine just to the northeast of any high ground, but for most it's going to be quite a cloudy day on offer and remaining fairly cloudy as we head into the weekend too. And that means temperatures are really going to struggle, so likely feeling chilly at times. Bye.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm Angela from Wigan and I won £30,000 with the Great British Giveaway. I'd say to people who want to enter or are wondering whether to enter to do it, it happens to people like me.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Lisa, you got in touch with me and you flagged this survey because you were concerned as a parent that your child had been given this to fill out.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter came home from school, she was very confused. She was asking why somebody would want to hurt themselves if they were feeling sad or worried about something. So that led to a conversation that we had, and I actually phoned the school and asked them to send me the survey, which with a lot of pushing, they eventually did send me the survey. And when I read through it, I was just completely shocked at the content. The survey says when I'm feeling worried that maybe I should try cutting or harming myself, because it's in the survey, so that must be an option. I've tried everything else, so why not try this?
It is astonishing that some of these are young children who are perhaps being introduced to these, these abuses for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a list of 17 different types of drugs, some of which I've actually never heard of myself. I mean, the wording on here is, have you ever got high from taking drugs? I mean...
And we know that some of these behaviours, self-harm, gender dysphoria, taking drugs, are psychologically contagious. Children do them because they see other children do them, or they find out about them from the internet or from surveys like this. So the idea that this is just information gathering and won't go any further than that is ridiculous. There was a similar survey in Scotland, I think, about 3 years ago, where children the same age, 11, 12, 13, were asked about their sex lives. How many times have you had sex in the last year? How did you have sex? Did you use contraception? Totally normalising underage sex. So the idea that children are just mini adults and we can confront them with all the same kind of ideas and dilemmas that adults have to face is just ridiculous.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Well, GB News right here with me, Matt Goodwin, the show that speaks up for the forgotten majority. Now, after 15 months since the 7th of October attacks in Israel, Hamas in Israel have come to a ceasefire agreement. We'll be bringing you all the latest in just a moment. Labour's war on free speech has reached its apex as the government reissues a watered-down version of the university free speech law that it originally scrapped. I will be revealing tonight the inside story of the original law that I helped to write and why this change won't go far enough to defend free speech. Meanwhile, the Reform Party is not only 1 point behind Labour in the national polls, but it's also the most popular party with the working class. I will be asking a disgruntled Labour trade unionist about why that is. Plus, unfortunately, I will not be here for the rest of the week, but I will be explaining why in due course. It might have something to do with what's happening in America involving a certain Donald Trump and a certain Nigel Farage. We will be heading stateside at the end of this programme to hear from a top Trump insider about what is about to happen in the United States of America. That is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, starts right now. Now, I'll also be joined tonight by my panel columnist and former MEP Patrick O'Flynn and historian and broadcaster Tessa Dunlop. As ever, let me know your views at gbnews.com/yoursay and hit me up on X at GoodwinMJ. But now it's time for the News Bulletin with Sam Francis.
Matt, thank you, and good evening to you. At just after 8 o'clock, the top story tonight. After 15 months of intense war, Israel and Hamas have now agreed to a ceasefire and hostage release deal. President Biden in the United States confirmed that plan just moments ago.
At long last, I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas. More than 15 months of conflict that began with Hezbollah's brutal massacre on October the 7th. More than 15 months of terror for the hostages, their families, the Israeli people. More than 15 months of suffering by the innocent people of Gaza. Fighting in Gaza will stop, and soon the hostages will return home to their families.
Well, the deal expected to start on Sunday involves releasing 33 Israeli hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners and a surge of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Negotiations for the next second phase, full troop withdrawal, more hostage releases and lasting peace, are then set to begin 2 weeks into that truce. Here, meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch have continued clashing over the economy today, trading blows on debt, tax hikes and leadership stability. Badenoch warned the UK is spending more on debt than on schools and hospitals and accused the Labour Chancellor of being unqualified and planning costly tax rises.
His Chancellor ignored all the warnings and ploughed ahead with an unprecedented borrowing spree, leaving all of us more vulnerable. Now we have businesses saying they will raise prices to cover his jobs tax. We have an energy policy that will drive up bills, and all the while we are spending more day to day on debt interest than we do on schools and universities. The Prime Minister refused to repeat his Chancellor's promise that she wouldn't come back for more. Will he now rule out any new tax rises this year? Yeah.
In response, Sir Keir Starmer called the Conservatives economic vandals and blamed them for a £22 billion black hole and what he described as the worst cost of living crisis in living memory. The Prime Minister also, though, defended Rachel Reeves, calling fiscal rules ironclad, but refused to rule out March tax hikes amid rising borrowing costs.
We had to deal with the £22 billion black hole that they left. The Chancellor will be in place for many, many years to come. She'll outstrip them. Mr. Speaker, if we all thought the politics was about cheap points, I could criticise their chancellors, but I don't have enough time to go through all of the chancellors that they had. We have one budget, that's what we're committed to, strong fiscal rules, and we'll stick to them, unlike the party opposite.
Police are investigating after a woman reported her drink was spiked in a bar at the Houses of Parliament. The parliamentary researcher made the complaint to staff and security on the 7th of January, just days after MPs returned from their Christmas break. Well, the Met Police say they are now supporting the victim and have confirmed an investigation is underway, though no arrests have been made so far. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has condemned the act as disturbing and serious. And the government is reviving a controversial free speech law for universities just months after it was paused over concerns about protecting hate speech. The Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act, passed in 2023, gave universities a duty to promote free speech and allowed the regulator to fine institutions or student unions that fail to comply. Critics, though, including Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson, paused that law last summer, warning it could expose universities to costly legal action. Now, a government source says the Act will be adjusted to balance academic freedom with a proper complaints process. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'll be back with you in an hour. Now, though, it's over to Matt.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, after 15 months of war since the 7th of October attacks, a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas has been reached. The deal is expected to include the return of all of the Israeli hostages held by Hamas, with Israel offering Palestinian detainees in exchange. Israeli soldiers will also be phased out of Gaza. Donald Trump wrote on Truth Social, "We have a deal for the hostages in the Middle East. They will be released shortly. Thank you." Now, to discuss this, I'm joined by Orit Eyal-Fabish, co-founder of the 7th of October Human Chain, the organisation that has campaigned ever since those hideous and horrific attacks for the return of the hostages. Orit, thank you for joining us tonight. Can I just get your initial reaction to the events of today as somebody who's campaigned for the return of the hostages?
Initial reaction is happiness mixed with anxiety and horror, to be honest. I am a mother of a 24-year-old and a 22-year-old, so they are the age of some of those hostages. This has been keeping me up at night for so long, and I can't even imagine what those parents must be feeling. So it's a mixture of happiness and satisfaction that we are finally there, but also great anxiety as to the state of those hostages, whether they are alive, whether they are dead, God forbid. And yeah, it's a turmoil of emotions, really.
And just tell us a bit, if you can, about how you think this is now going to play out in Israel. I mean, for viewers who won't be familiar with the public mood in Israel, particularly regarding the government, particularly regarding the future development of this issue, I mean, how do you see things unfolding over the coming weeks?
I think what you need to understand about Israel is that at the end of the day, despite the difference of opinions, and there are many different opinions, those who oppose Netanyahu and those who support Netanyahu's government, we are a young country. We are a country of people who came to Israel from mostly unfortunate circumstances. You know, my parents and grandparents are Holocaust survivors. There is this common understanding that there isn't another place for the Jewish people. And when things come to this kind of existential threat, despite the differences, we all come together, we all fight together, we're all traumatized in the same way as a nation. And so I think the differences will remain, obviously, and conclusions will be made at a later stage. But for now, we will all focus on getting those hostages home. And as a nation, we are looking at a long healing process. There's not only tens of thousands of soldiers on the Israeli side who are decapitated and lost sight, and mental issues there, but there are generations of people who have been affected by this all, and we have to rebuild a lot of what has been taken away from us.
And just bringing this to the UK, if I may, obviously since the 7th, we've seen, what many people watching this programme will feel were pretty horrific scenes here in the UK, marches, demonstrations, protests, singing of songs and anti-Semitism, many British Jews feeling as though they are really in a hostile environment. How will these events today play into that? I mean, how is this going to affect the dynamics of this conflict here on the streets of Britain?
I think it will take time for us to see the effect of what's been happening. It will also depend greatly on the result, on the outcome of this long and tedious and nerve-wracking process that we are all, which will hopefully start on Sunday. The anti-Semitism is a problem. It's a genuine problem. Whilst I can maybe understand why the issue had risen, I do not agree with the way it's being done. And I think we are allowed to feel safe here in the same way that many others do. And we will, in the same way that the Israeli nation will have to heal, I think that the Jewish people in the diaspora in the world will have to find a way to explain and to recover from all of this. And the Muslims will also need to come to terms with the fact that Israel and Israelis are here to stay, and the Jewish people are here to stay. And in the same way, the Palestinians, 2.2 million Palestinians are not going to disappear. The Israelis and the Jewish people are not going to disappear either. So there will have to be a way. We will have to find the time at some point to focus on a solution, on a lasting.
Yeah. And Arid, if I may, you're in touch with the families, you're in touch with the relatives of the hostages. I mean, this must have been an absolutely horrific ordeal. I can't imagine what those families have gone through. What's going on in their minds now? I mean, paint us a picture as to what are they talking about and how are they thinking and feeling about this?
I think it's everything that you and I can imagine, just times hundreds and more. You know, they are very fearful. I don't even know if they're able at this point to feel happiness. There must be a sense of relief, but the anxiety and the uncertainty and the question marks as to how they are and what stage they're in, what state they are, is probably taking things.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, my heart goes out to all of the families and the relatives, and also, you know, my best wishes to your organisation that has campaigned so consistently on this issue. And thank you, Arit, for coming on the show this evening on what is going to be seen as a historic day. After the break, we're going to be looking at Labour's war on free speech in this country as it attempts to crawl back on its decision to scrap a free speech law, which, get this, I actually helped to implement. But now Bridget Phillipson and Labour are saying they're going to bring back, but without all the important bits. Join me in a couple of minutes and we'll hear from a top prof. See you shortly.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Look, if people want to do veganuary, that's all well and good, but it shouldn't be forced on people, should it? Or even strongly suggested by something like the NHS?
It's not being forced on anybody. People can choose in the Wirral or any other NH trust that gets involved whether they want to partake or not. What they're doing are promoting the benefits of a vegan diet. Now, you imagine you're the NHS trust. You've got one person dying every 3 minutes from heart disease, and vegans get much less high blood pressure, much less heart disease than do meat eaters. So surely, if your job is to promote health, then you should let people know these kind of stats. Vegans get less cancer. Red meat is a class 1 carcinogen, classed by the World Health Organization as processed meat definitely causes cancer of the bowel. So it's just letting people know what the health advantages are of reducing or taking meat completely out of your diet and becoming vegan. You get less diabetes type 2, which is a big problem in the UK, less deaths from stroke, and around 1/5 less of all cancers. Imagine it was drugs that had that kind of impact. People would be hailing it and going, wow, this is amazing.
You know, to call it about diversity and inclusion, I just think that's a load of nonsense. This is a move away by public bodies from this compulsory veganism. Look, your speaker from Viva, which is a very hardline animal rights organisation, attempts to talk about the environment and other issues, but really this to them is about animal rights. They don't believe in a world where we should use animals. I completely disagree with the speaker. I respect her right to say that, of course, but I completely disagree. And that's why the NHS and public bodies just shouldn't be getting involved in things that are so controversial.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, Keir Starmer and the Labour government has reintroduced a university free speech law after, get this, initially scrapping it. The new version is a heavily watered-down version of the original law that I helped create with other academics in the universities who were fed up with cancel culture and woke ideology. In fact, I elaborate on many of those issues in a book next month. But the wider problem here is not just what's going on in our universities, it's what's going on in the battle for free speech in this country. Just think about everything that we've seen since the Labour government came to power. We've seen people being thrown into prison for sharing memes, for sharing offensive views on social media in the privacy of their own homes. We've seen much discussion of this new definition of Islamophobia, which includes references to the rape gangs as an example of Islamophobia, a move that many people see as an attempt to clamp down on any criticism of Islam and cultural practices within Muslim communities. We've seen this new workers' rights charter, which you might have seen in the newspapers yesterday, because it could ban pub banter. If you're caught talking about controversial issues such as transgender ideology or the rape gangs in a pub and a worker decides that that's harassment, they could in theory sue that pub or that restaurant for having offended their views. We've also seen people like Yvette Cooper, the Labour Home Secretary, talking about wanting to expand non-crime hate incidents, these rather Orwellian measures that many people think are designed to clamp down on free speech and free expression in our country. We've also seen plans for a trans-inclusive conversion therapy ban. And of course, who could forget the time that a Labour MP stood up in the House of Commons and called in Britain for blasphemy laws, and our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, didn't even rule it out. Check out this clip for a moment. It's quite striking.
Will the Prime Minister commit to introducing measures to prohibit the desecration of all religious texts and the prophets of the Abrahamic religions?
Well, can I agree with him that desecration is awful and I think should be condemned across the House?
I'm sorry, but do we live in Britain, the home of individual liberty, the home of common law, the home of free expression, or do we live in some sort of authoritarian state? Because over the last few months, we've also seen Keir Starmer and other people within the Labour government decide that millions of people in Britain are far right for discussing issues like the rape gangs. And we've also seen them complain about foreign interference by people like Elon Musk while sending their activists to America to campaign on behalf of Kamala Harris, or as we saw with Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney's company, the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, which he helped to found, actively talking about killing Elon Musk's Twitter or X platform. So what I'm trying to say here is Labour's war on free speech is both visible, but it's also here to stay. And I think we can see it now in the universities. As always, let me know your views via gbnews.com/yoursay or tweet me at GoodwinMJ. But I'm joined in the studio now by Professor of Politics at the University of Buckingham, Eric Kaufman, who also looks after the only anti-woke research centre in the UK, which has been offering programmes to people who are interested in studying woke ideology. And Eric's done more than most to campaign to defend free speech in our university. So, Eric, welcome to the show. Today, lots of people out there will have read about Labour's reintroduction of this free speech law. Labour now will say they're defending free speech in the universities. It's not quite what it seems, though, is it?
No. They introduced this partly because there's a judicial review coming up and also because of pressure in the media and from academics and open letters. But the reality is this is a toothless bill. And it's toothless in four ways. I mean, the first thing is that student unions, who are a chief culprit when it comes to no platforming, are no longer covered. Students can no longer appeal to the OFS, to an ombudsman. Students are now excluded. Third, they've taken away the right to a statutory tort, so universities can ignore rulings by the OFS.
So just on that, so the important part of the original law, which was brought in under the Conservative government, was that basically universities that violated free speech, that violated the freedom of academics to research whatever they wanted, those universities could be fined, which would incentivise them to protect free speech. But now what you're saying is Labour has removed that threat of punishment, that threat of financial sanctions. So therefore, if you're a university vice-chancellor or you're, let's say, a woke bureaucrat, do you really care anymore about protecting free speech?
Well, you can't be sued if you ignore the rulings. Now, technically, there is still the right to fine, but here's the most ominous thing, is Bridget Phillipson has just recently, in a piece in the Times Higher, suggested that political appointments were at work in the past, and that's something she's going to look into. The coded message there is that Arif Ahmed, who's the free speech czar, the director of the Academic Freedom Directorate, is more or less going to be on a tight leash. And so what I think that's going to mean is when Arif goes to universities and says, oh, your policies are not compliant with the Act, he's going to be sort of wrapped on the knuckles, a hand will come on the shoulder, and there's no way he's going to be allowed to fine people.
So let's just step out a minute. So what we've got in universities in Britain, which most people won't be aware, well, we've got this creeping cancel culture, we've got this creeping woke ideology, we've got the fact that universities now lean overwhelmingly to the left. I think I'm right in saying that about 85% of academics identify on the left of politics today. You've got lots of students self-censoring, hiding their views, concealing their views because they're scared of speaking up. And now we've got a Labour government that's basically removing all of the venom, if you like, from this new law, which means that the status quo is going to carry on. Is that right?
Essentially, yes. I think we should expect to see a continuation of the cancellations and the no platformings because they've really defanged this bill, because they don't believe in it. I mean, they opposed it tooth and nail in Parliament, in the Lords. They said it was a, forces inside there, or people in government said this was a hate speech charter. You look at the lobbies, the University College Union, which is the main lecturers' union, very radical at the top. You look at Universities UK, they all oppose this bill. And let's face it, if we sort of step back, you just mentioned about a number of crises in free speech in Britain. Social justice is a much higher value than freedom of speech for the left.
So for people on the left, what you're saying is their ideological project is more important to them than defending free speech and free expression, that is what differentiates people on the left from people on the right.
Yeah, and just to translate for the listeners or the viewers here, social justice essentially means protecting one's emotions from harm. So if speech harms a very sensitive individual, that individual's so-called emotional safety has been compromised if they're a member of a so-called historically marginalized group. So protecting members of historically marginalized group from speech they don't want to hear is more important than allowing speech. And
OK, so let me ask a devil's advocate question here for a minute. Lots of people watching the show will say, well, we've talked about censorship on campus, academics being sacked, people being disinvited for decades, right? People watching the show will remember similar debates in the 70s and the 80s. Is it really that bad on university campus today, they will ask. And in fact, Labour MPs, I'm sure, will say in response to this show, well, Matt, show me, the big scandals, show me the hundreds of students being, marched off campus or whatever. I mean, is it really that bad?
It is really that bad, Matt, and I think we have many different ways of measuring it. I mean, one, yes, there are prominent people who get cancelled, like Kathleen Stock and Amber Rudd and so on. But for every one of those, we have thousands of academics whose speech is chilled. So 1 in 10 academics say they have either been punished or threatened with punishment for speech. We have members of political minorities, gender-critical feminists, conservatives are far more likely to worry. I'll give you a good example of how much chilled speech is going on. Only 1 in 5 Brexit-supporting academics in the social sciences say they would be willing to express that view to a colleague.
That's me. Well, that's me. I was a Brexit-supporting academic in the social sciences. So only 1 in 5 would be able to share their views.
Would be willing to share their views. And for students, it's 2 in 5. Brexit-supporting students. So,
but what about if you're a Remainer? If I was a Remain-supporting academic in the social sciences?
It's about 90%.
90% would feel comfortable.
90 versus, what is that, 20? 20 versus 90.
So, okay, just quickly, what happens if we don't fix the universities?
Well, we will continue to have a narrowing of viewpoint diversity. We will not have... The knowledge production system will be systematically skewed and biased. Certain questions won't be asked. Certain views will be barred. I mean, can you actually investigate... Are puberty blockers effective? Could you say, well, actually, they do more harm than good, and publish that and have that view as an academic today? Well, probably not.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. And as always, you know, having gone through the universities myself for 20 years, you know, I've lived this ride. I've seen the hostility. I've seen the intolerance on campus. And I think what we're going to see here is a Labour government coming out in the next few days and weeks saying, well, we are defending free speech on campus. We are defending free expression, but actually, in reality, what they're doing is taking the teeth out of this law and making it almost impossible to reinforce. So, Eric Kaufman, thank you for coming on State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, tonight. Well, after the break, we're going to be talking about a whole load of other interesting stuff, including whether the Reform Party is the new party of the working class. We're going to be talking to a Labour trade unionist about that. And then we're going to be going over to Washington to hear about Trump too. So join me in a couple of minutes. See you then.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We could see some rather foggy starts as we head into tomorrow. Then through the day, we'll see a mix of cloud and some brighter spells, though it is going to be a cooler feeling day for most. Largely settled as we head into tonight as high pressure dominates, but a frontal system in the far north can bring some drizzle at times. This mainly across the far northwest of Scotland. Mostly dry for many of us. Plenty of cloud this evening across the south and southeast. This could be quite murky by the morning, likely to see some fog in places. Even some fog developing under some clearer skies, and also plenty of cloud across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Feeling chillier too, also under these cloudier skies, but for many it's quite a mild night on offer, particularly across the far northwest of Scotland. So to start the day tomorrow, plenty of cloud around across Scotland, but feeling chillier in any clearer spells. Also a chance we could still see some light outbreaks of drizzle across the very far north. Quite a cloudy start across Northern Ireland and a few more clearer spells across Northern Ireland, northern parts of Wales too, but chillier here. Could even see some pockets of frost and also some fog, and plenty of cloud across southern and central areas of England. Quite murky starts and this fog slow to clear in places, so do take care if you're travelling around through the morning. Then through much of the day it remains fairly similar. Should start to see some sunshine across Wales and northern England, but that cloud is set to stay across the south and southeast and turning quite blustery across the far north of Scotland through the day too. A cooler day on offer for most, but for many across Scotland, temperatures above average for the time of year. Heading into tomorrow, likely to see more outbreaks of rain and drizzle across parts of Scotland, quite blustery here too. And elsewhere, plenty of cloud around, though it is going to be staying largely dry. Both best of the sunshine just to the northeast of any high ground, but for most it's going to be quite a cloudy day on offer and remaining fairly cloudy as we head into the weekend too. And that means temperatures are really going to struggle, so likely feeling chilly at times. Bye.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, we've had some viewer reactions to our discussion just now on cancel culture in the universities. John says, we are being forced to accept what we don't want or agree with. What is going on here? Censorship and liberty removal, we are going backwards. And Patricia says, nothing and no one will ever stop me from speaking my free speech. Patricia, I agree with you completely. Now, turning to another story, the Reform Party had another good week this week in the national polls, coming within 1 point of the Labour Party. It's been joint #1 in some of the polling recently. But one of the more interesting aspects about this, which very few people have picked up on, is that the Reform Party is now also, in the latest YouGov poll, the most popular political party among the working class. Not quite what you'd expect, given some of the coverage of the party in the mainstream media. Now, I'm joined tonight by Paul Embry, a sort of Labour supporting trade unionist. Paul, what is going on? Why is the working class flocking to Nigel Farage and Reform? What's your view?
Well, good evening, Matt. I mean, the truth is the old, if you like, industrial working class element of the Labour Party has been hollowing out of the party for about the last 30 years. I don't think that's anything new particularly, because the party has gradually become a party for the professional and managerial classes. I say that as a member of the Labour Party and a trade unionist, and largely a party for people living in our fashionable cities and our university towns. And I think people in what you might call small town Britain, post-industrial Britain, Britain beyond the M25, increasingly
real Britain, you might say.
well, quite, and increasingly found it hard to identify with the Labour Party, and they started shifting their votes elsewhere, or in many cases, as you know, Matt, just stop voting altogether. And the truth is that today there is a massive cultural disconnect, I think, between large elements of the Labour Party, particularly its upper echelons, and those ordinary working class communities. And we shouldn't be fooled by the election result last July. The C2DEs, which, as you know, is the occupational working class, the Labour Party only got 33%, which was exactly the same as they got in 2019. The industrial working class, the occupational working class, did not vote for Labour in any greater numbers last time than they did in 2019.
Can I just quickly pick you up on this? Because this isn't just about Britain, is it? Across Western nations, workers have been flocking to anti-establishment parties. But there's something going on at the moment with Keir Starmer, you know, this sort of tendency to dismiss everybody as far right, to not really deal with the underlying issues around migration, globalisation. Do you think Starmer's actually exacerbating the defection of workers away from the big parties to Reform?
Well, look, we have to remember that Starmer, in my view, is very much a Tony Blair sort of figure. He's a North London Liberal lawyer. He doesn't particularly understand the impulses of working class blue collar Britain. And I think when they experience the views and the priorities of working class Britain, it's almost like they see it as a mob that needs to be curtailed and needs to be held back. And that's the difficulty for the Labour Party, that they simply are not in touch in the way that the Labour Party was once upon a time, whether you agreed with it or not. It was a party that understood the working class. Starmer has bet the farm on getting growth and getting immigration down and fixing the National Health Service. Now, 6 months into this Labour government, there's precious little sign of any progress on any of those things. And if they don't start making progress soon, the reality is that the likes of Reform, which are well placed in a lot of Labour constituencies, came second in 89 Labour constituencies, 60 of which were in the north of England. That Reform wolf is at the door. And if Labour doesn't make progress on those key issues, then Reform could be a real threat.
Well, thanks, Paul. It's insightful as ever. I recommend your book, Despised, as well, which really had an impact on my own thinking. Let's just bring in the panel for a second. Patrick O'Flynn, I mean, there's something going on. Workers are going to reform, but there is a tension here, don't you think, with working-class voters often leaning a little bit left to the economy, right, a little bit right on culture. Do you think reform has got the policy mix to actually win those voters and hold those voters, given that many reform MPs are of a more Thatcherite ethos?
I don't think at the moment the reform is being judged on its unfully worked out policies. I think working class voters now have had quite a long relationship with Nigel Farage and have quite a degree of respect for him. I think they're in a mood that the system's not working. Neither of the established parties have done anything for either their private living standards or what you might call social living standards for a decade or more. And the idea of Nigel Farage being someone who upsets the establishment is quite popular among working class voters. I think also they're a lot less easy to browbeat by people you might call the intelligentsia, saying these aren't respectable people to vote for. So I think Nigel's always done well with working class voters, you know, and at the moment the other parties are just not offering anything.
Tessa, there's a real problem here for the Labour Party, isn't it? I mean, I could see the red wall at the next general election going to reform. I mean, I could see this becoming an enormous problem for Labour, as well as Wales, by the way. I mean, you know, reform in the Welsh polling is looking pretty strong.
It's interesting because history tells us that when people are feeling down on their luck, and I think Britain has been feeling that way for the best bit of a decade, really, there's a tendency for fringe parties to rise up. We saw it with the SDLP, with the the return of the Liberal Party in the 70s and the 80s. They were coming in the early 80s around between 19 to 30% almost.
Yeah, 25 here.
Yeah. A real challenge. But a protest vote. Predominantly, what happened about 40 years ago was against what the perceived establishment was doing. And
is it a protest vote, do you think?
I continue to believe that the option of reform, given our first past the post system, at the moment, Nigel Farage is the Trump whisperer, he's here, he's there, he's everywhere, but he's got 5 seats. Now, to become a valid threat to the Labour Party in the next election, he's going to have to do a lot more than 5 seats. He's more of a threat, I think, to the fabric of the Tory party, chipping away at possible seats they can win back off Liberals and Tories.
Patrick, come in here. I mean,
I
is that
disagree with
right?
that. I think actually a lot's happened since the election, and I think first past the post you can correctly depict as a suppressor of insurgent parties. But if you reach a certain level in the polls, reform is now averaging, I looked at poll trackers at 24 on some of them, and no other party is over 30%. You know, suddenly it can start paying out a lot of seats. If reform can add another 5 points, it can suddenly win literally hundreds of seats.
I think I'm right.
On less than 30%.
Just bring Tessa in a second. I think I'm right in saying the magic number for reform here is about 32%. Now, they're polling 25. They get to 32%, finishing ahead of the Conservatives. You could see what we saw in the early 20th century. Remember, when Labour replaced the Liberals as the second party.
You could, but that was because you had the expansion of male suffrage, you had women entering the vote, you had a big shift in the industrial economy.
Now you have mass immigration and broken borders.
Yeah, but I don't see those mass immigrants voting for reform. So
no, but I see a lot of the British people voting for reform.
Well, certainly there's cultural shifts. We saw in the 60s when there was a migration in from the Commonwealth countries. We saw that resulting in a complexity in the way people approach the ballot box. But I still don't see reform as more than a protest vote riding that common tiger of migration. I don't see them having the answers for the NHS.
For that protest point.
Yeah.
If you survey reform voters, as I've done, the top 2 issues for voting reform, stopping the boats, lowering mass immigration, ending mass immigration. That is a vote for something. A protest vote, Patrick, implies that it's a vote against something.
Yes, I mean, you could say it's a protest vote as well, because it's protesting against establishment parties who neither have delivered nor are going to deliver either of those 2 key points. And I think while Nigel Farage might not have the fully worked out next manifesto policies, what he does have is enormous amounts of credibility based on a track record of 25 years of arguing about the downsides of excessive immigration, both legal and illegal, at a time, and, you know, I was one of those who was doing it as well as a media person, at a time when that was very unfashionable and very stigmatising and, you know, talked about free speech earlier. There was a lot of pressure not to tackle those issues. Nigel's one of the very few people who did.
I mean, I was reading an essay recently by Marco Rubio, the American senator, who was trying to explain why Donald Trump is so popular among the working class. And what Rubio was saying, and I think it applies here, is he says it isn't just about immigration. It's the fact that the working class in Western nations have been smashed apart by globalization.
I agree, and sneered at.
But also smashed apart by net zero. I mean, these are the guys who are paying ULEZ fees. These are the guys who are getting hammered by low-traffic neighbourhoods. These are the guys who are getting the energy bills and having to pay. And these are the guys who are getting told that they're racist, that they're gammons, that they're garbage, they're deplorable simply for expressing their views.
I think there has been a communal sneer against certain parts of predominantly white poor Britain.
I've seen it in universities.
I concede that. I think to pile it onto net zero is disingenuous. You know, we've got fuel. Arguably, we've got energy insecurities that result in very high bills. But in fact, a lot of the low-picking fruit that David Cameron did, you know, closing down dinosaur gas stations, hasn't really been the reason for high fuel prices. That's because of the Ukraine war and our failure to back up the national grid more effectively. So I think that's a bit of a straw man. Just quickly on your idea that reform is for things, I actually perceive reform to be against the small boats. But if you drill into the small boats idea, it's more of a kind of cultural notion. In terms of the vast balloon of migration, it's a spectre, really. It's less than a tenth.
It's a violating of the social contract. You can gate crash a country and access its benefits, its social housing, get put up in hotels when people who are of that nation are freezing to death on the streets. Working class voters in particular will not put up with that.
In terms of that delivering real change, actual cost of living, lifestyle benefits for your average Joe voting either Reform or Labour at the next election, I don't believe it.
Cost of living benefits, we're paying £5.5 billion a year on our broken asylum system. How many winter fuel payments could that cover for Britain's pensioners? £5.5 billion a year. It's bonkers. So when you say, well, the small boats is a small part of the migration, the point about the small boats crisis, I think Patrick maybe came to it, is it really violates the British sense of fair play that is foundational to our culture, that you have to play by the rules. You have to respect your peers, your neighbours. And if you're breaking the law, your first act on coming into the country is to break the law, that flies in the face of our sense of fairness.
I agree. The high bar that we have erected for many asylum seekers means it's extremely expensive to keep them back. But just quickly, if you look at the stagnating German economy, one of the key reasons is a shortage of labour. So this idea that you're going to have net migration, no migration, actually the shortage of labour means you can't grow your economy.
We're getting data all the time in this country now, dribbling out about how inept our selection of migrants has been. We've gone for mass migration, not skilled migration, and the majority of migrants who've come in haven't been making significant economic contributions, often making no economic contributions
Absolutely.
at all.
Well, look, this debate is going to carry on. I think, low-skill migration is absolutely something we've talked about right here on this show. Thank you to my panel for their thoughts. As always, let me know what you think too. After the break, I'm going to be revealing why I am off for the rest of the week, heading to Washington with somebody you might have heard of. And I'm going to be talking to a guest from Washington who knows a lot more than most people about what to expect from Trump 2. Come back in a few minutes. You're not going to want to miss this one. See you shortly.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Storm Felix is set to affect central parts of the Mediterranean, bringing some rain, mountain snow and also strong winds. But further west, largely settled for the Canary Islands, Madeira, Portugal and also most of Spain. But towards the eastern coast, we could see some heavy showers here. The heaviest likely across Sicily and parts of Sardinia, and also likely to see some mountain snow across the highest parts of Italy and also Greece. Towards the weekend, though, largely settled and temperatures remaining around the same.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
TikTok chefs, Instagram chefs, that they put children off or young people off of cooking because it's so expertly done they can't do it. No, my young lad, he's 17, he is amazing in the kitchen. Oh, he is. He's amazing in the kitchen. And he gets it all off TikTok. He comes down, he can put burgers, wraps, stews, curries, sauces, and the smells in the kitchen. I said, where'd you get these? Oh, just TikTok, I'm trying it out. And it's just amazing the things that he can conjure up. So for some people, it might be... it's an inspiration for him. So they're saying that it's intimidation. For my boy, it's an inspiration. They say it's entertainment. For my boy, it's an infomercial. I watch him doing his stuff. At that stage, I could do baked beans on toast and knock up a salad. That was it. But my boy can do all sorts of stuff.
It makes it accessible as well, doesn't it? Because lots of people say, like, you need an education to be in the kitchen, or you need to go find yourself loads of cookbooks. But you don't.
No.
You go on your phone now.
Well, I mean, like, all the spices, sesame oil. I mean, I'm amazed at the stuff that he does. So it's encouraging. All you just need is a kitchen well-stocked and have a go. And understand that failure is actually the route to learning. I mean, he's made mistakes, he's stuck stuff in the bin, but that young man, I am amazed at some of the stuff he does.
I don't mind cooking at all. It's cleaning up that I have the problem with. Dawn, let's talk about
Can I just say there are things called restaurants, by the way? Just put that one. My hell, I don't even know where the kitchen is.
OK.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, as promised, I said I would explain why I won't be here for the rest of the week. Tomorrow, I am flying off to Washington, D.C. One of the things I'm doing, I'll be attending Nigel Farage's party in advance of Donald Trump's inauguration on Monday, meeting with some American politicians. And who knows, maybe some of the attendees might just end up on this show some point soon. But a Trump presidency has huge ramifications for British politics, not least because it could act as a deterrent against some of the more radical, progressive policies that Keir Starmer and his Labour government are imposing on the rest of us. The Chagos Islands deal is perhaps a perfect example. Now, tonight, I'm happy to say I'm joined by the editor of the National Pulse and key Trump insider Raheem Kassam, live from Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. Raheem, thanks for joining the show.
Professor, thank you for having me.
So, you are closer to the Trump camp than pretty much everybody watching this show and pretty much everybody in Westminster. Just give us a view, if you could, from Washington. Trump 2. We're on the cusp of Trump 2. How is this going to be different, do you think, from Trump 1?
Yeah, it's an amazing question. It's an amazing thing to think about because, you know, people will recall back in 2016, the victory was very much a shock victory. It even shocked President-elect Donald Trump back then. I remember when Nigel Farage and I went up to see him in the penthouse at Trump Tower, you know, the famous golden elevator picture now. And the first thing he said to us was, "Is this a big deal?" And we sort of were taken aback by the question and said, "Is what a big deal?" He says, "Me winning, is that a big deal?" And you could tell that he couldn't quite get his head around it. Well, none of that trepidation, none of that surprise is built into this. They really ran a campaign that was ready for governing day one. There are all sorts of personnel issues that are still being worked through, and there's thousands and thousands of positions to fill. But when it comes to day one going into the Oval Office, there is already a long list of executive actions. There is already a long list of demands from Congress and where President Trump will require the cooperation of Congress, for instance, on the border wall and appropriating funds and all of that. But the wider answer to your question is, last time they weren't ready. This time, they're hyper ready.
Yeah. Raheem, if I can, so, ready for government, ready to take on the state, ready to build the wall, etc. There's a lot of people watching this show who will notice that one person who won't be at the inauguration will be Keir Starmer. Also, by the way, I think I'm right in saying Peter Mandelson. Give us a sense as to what the Trump camp are thinking and feeling when it comes to our Labour government.
Well, I have to tell you, and it doesn't fill me with any glee to talk about it this way, because I am obviously interested in what's best for my home country, the United Kingdom. But unfortunately, the Labour apparatus, the Labour staffers that have been sent down to sunny Palm Beach to kind of work the rooms over there, from my understanding, are getting pretty short shrift. Now, I will caveat that by saying, if you've ever met President Trump, if you've encountered him, if you've worked with him, people will know, and I've met him many, many times, will know that he's actually a pretty magnanimous person face to face. He's very welcoming. He's quite gentle. And so he will be trying to elicit the best out of them as possible. The problem is you've obviously got everything that the Labour Party was doing throughout the campaign. You've now got a Labour Party that's at odds with the United States over many, many geopolitical issues. So the people around President Trump are sort of looking at that and going, not so sure how well we can work with you guys.
Interesting. Well, fascinating stuff straight from Washington. Raheem Kassam, do check him out on social media. He's always ahead of the curve. Patrick, if I can, just building on what Raheem was saying there. I mean, we have this remarkable situation. We've got a very pro-Britain president coming into the White House, pro-UK, Team UK. He's got, lots of investments here. But we've also got a government, that just seems completely incapable of sort of welcoming President Trump with open arms. I mean, how do you see the special relationship going over the next few weeks and months?
I think it's going to be very bumpy. I actually, and most of the people watching at home will probably not agree with me, I actually think Peter Mandelson is a vastly more sophisticated operator than almost anyone in this terrible Labour government. And
well, that's not saying much.
No, it's possibly not saying much, but I do think he will try and turn on the charm. He won't berate Trump.
Yeah.
I do think that he has a better chance than some of the other possible ambassadors of forging a decent working relationship.
Sure. And Tessa, if I may, I mean, do you read the room the same way, or do you think actually maybe, we've got Nigel Farage, let's be frank, who's become a sort of, almost unofficial conduit through to President-elect Trump, and arguably Farage's status is going to be enhanced. I mean, Keir Starmer seems to be out of touch with this president.
Yeah, but first among equals, he's not a president, Keir Starmer, he's a prime minister. I think Trump's always going to have, well, he is, yeah, and one who has a thumping majority, love it or loathe it. But he's always going to have a place in his heart, Trump, for Nigel Farage, because he led the way. He was the lightning rod that delivered Brexit, that made Trump look possible, and indeed Trump becomes a reality just a few months later.
I remember it. I think I wrote at the time, if we voted for Brexit, they might vote for Trump.
Exactly. So I think Trump will always have this kind of hot spot, or soft spot rather, for Farage. But in terms of Britain, where we deliver is by leading Europe in NATO. We pay our way better than, more than most European countries. And also, don't forget Prince William. Don't forget Prince William.
Hang on. Thank you to the my panel. I've got to cut you off because up next is Patrick Christis. Patrick, I know what you've got coming up on your show, but I want everybody else to know what you've got coming up on your show because it's pretty special.
Bombshell polling, Matt. Yes, that's absolutely right. So we have done some polling and we can reveal how out of touch Keir Starmer is on the grooming gangs issue. We can also reveal who, officially, Britain's most popular politician is. So we're going to be doing that. I'm also going to be talking about this Gerry Adams issue. What is Labour's problem when it comes to basically appeasing the IRA? Obviously, Gerry Adams denies ever being part of the IRA. I'm also going to be speaking to a brave survivor of the grooming gangs issue, so stay tuned for that.
Well, I'm glad you're keeping it on the agenda, Splendid. That's all coming up after the weather. I'll be back with you next Wednesday right here on State of the Nation. Engage with me on social media. I'll keep you in touch with what's going on in Washington. See you very soon right here on State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. Bye-bye.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We could see some rather foggy starts as we head into tomorrow. Then through the day, we'll see a mix of cloud and some brighter spells, though it is going to be a cooler feeling day for most. Largely settled as we head into tonight as high pressure dominates, but a frontal system in the far north can bring some drizzle at times. This mainly across the far northwest of Scotland. Mostly dry for many of us. Plenty of cloud this evening across the south and southeast. This could be quite murky by the morning, likely to see some fog in place. Even some fog developing under some clearer skies, and also plenty of cloud across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Feeling chillier too, also under these cloudier skies, but for many it's quite a mild night on offer, particularly across the far northwest of Scotland. So to start the day tomorrow, plenty of cloud around across Scotland, but feeling chillier in any clearer spells. Also a chance we could still see some light outbreaks of drizzle across the very far north. Quite a cloudy start across Northern Ireland and a few more clearer spells across Northern Ireland, northern parts of Wales too, but chillier here. Could even see some pockets of frost and also some fog, and plenty of cloud across southern and central areas of England. Quite murky starts and this fog slow to clear in places, so do take care if you're travelling around through the morning. Then through much of the day it remains fairly similar. Should start to see some sunshine across Wales and northern England, but that cloud is set to stay across the south and southeast and turning quite blustery across the far north of Scotland through the day too. A cooler day on offer for most, but for many across Scotland, temperatures above average for the time of year. Heading into tomorrow, likely to see more outbreaks of rain and drizzle across parts of Scotland, quite blustery here too. And elsewhere, plenty of cloud around, though it is going to be staying largely dry. Both best of the sunshine just to the northeast of any high ground, but for most it's going to be quite a cloudy day on offer and remaining fairly cloudy as we head into the weekend too. And that means temperatures are really going to struggle, so likely feeling chilly at times. Bye.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever, an incredible £50,000. That's tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this year. What would you spend it on? £50,000 could buy those treats you've always dreamed of having. And just one entry into the Great British Giveaway really could make £50,000 cash all yours. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls